Hello, I am John Najarian, and RebelCon 2022 is almost here. We do have a virtual pass. The virtual pass gives you full access to everything, all the streams, the live trading sessions, all of our fabulous keynote speakers. So to learn more about what's going on at RebelCon 2022, whether you're in person or virtual, check out marketrebellion.com/Dallas. Hello, folks, and welcome back. I'm going to stop with the bang or the clapping.
Bang.
Mainly because Jared was getting pissed, Pete.
I took the role then.
Jared was saying it was hurting his ears, right, Jared?
See, Jared? Yeah. Poor Jared's in Chicago going, what the hell?
Folks, you're tuned into the Rebel Edge. I am John Najarian. He's Pete Najarian. Jared, welcome you. Thank you for joining us. It's a holiday shortened week next week, not this week. We trade a full 5 days, but really, after the unemployment number comes out Friday, there's not going to be much trading. Trust me. And we thought we'd incorporate a macro minute. And some of you are thinking, why a minute? And it's because we don't want to waste a whole half hour or hour like many in the financial news are damned and determined to do. So, Pete, I'd throw out there that it's J-Pow and it's energy. As far as that's all the macro people need, you don't need more than that.
I think you're right. I think Jay Powell, all you got to do is go back to Friday and see the word pain. When the Fed Reserve Chair says the word be prepared for pain, you're going to send the markets into exactly what we saw on Friday and a little overflow all the way even through the weekend. But as you said, John, that's as much macro as we're going to do. Sorry, but that's the way it is. It's not that interesting. Let's talk about stocks.
All right. Started off, Pete, with OXY.
Yep.
Because for whatever reason, and I think we all know the reason, they want the stock to go higher. They're letting Warren Buffett buy up to what, 52% of Occidental, Pete? And ever since they made that announcement, shares have been going boom, boom, boom. And we've had numerous occasions of unusual activity. The stock hits a new 52-week high today, Pete. It traded over $77 a share. And, there's other, of course, energy stocks reacting to a $3 pop in crude. But I didn't see anybody else hitting 52-week highs.
No, but we've seen a lot of option activity in there, John. We've been watching that for a while now, even pre-Warren Buffett talking about wanting to have more and more and more and more. And as you said, now 50+% is what he's looking for. So if you're Occidental, I guess you don't want to get too nervous about it, but you might be a little bit nervous. The other thing is this, John, not only, and everybody talks about, and I hear it on TV all the time, the volumes are getting pretty low. Well, the volumes are still high in the options world. We're averaging 40 million per day in the month of August and per day year to date. But on top of that, Occidental, how about this for some numbers? It averages 27 million shares a day, 80 million, 47 million, 60 million, 39 million. Those are the days in the last week or so of how much volume we're seeing there. So there's a heck of a lot of participation. And it's pretty daggone interesting to see where that stock is today, John, hitting 77, actually above 77 today.
Absolutely, Pete. And Jared, nice job getting that chart up there because, that showed you those big volume days, two of them over or approaching 50 million in one, and the other one almost 80 million.
Yeah.
So put that in your pipe and smoke it. What about Chinese internets, Pete? PDD, Penduo. E-commerce, they're just killing it. They reported earnings better than expected.
Yeah.
Chinese internets have been doing well. You and I talked about them last week. We highlighted Baba and Billy and a whole bunch of those. It's not all Chinese stocks, but it's Chinese internet stocks because they're still locked down. So I guess some of the e-commerce plays like PDD and some of the others can really still do well, Pete.
Yeah, mobile only platform, John. I mean, these guys are absolutely crushing it. You hit it, but they smashed the earnings, they smashed the revenue. The revenue was only up 36%. I mean, not
Only.
that much. I mean, only 36%. Operating income, well, that tripled. There's almost not a category, John, that they didn't absolutely crush. But the most interesting thing is that my takeaway is this: they really, either they don't know much about what they see into the future, and that's maybe okay, but they didn't give any kind of guidance. And that would be something that I think you might scratch your head a little bit just to say, you know what, I'd like to see what you guys are projecting going forward. But the numbers that we have seen have absolutely been extraordinary, and PDD is crushing it, and they're crushing the competition. They're crushing JD, they're crushing Baba. They absolutely are the leader right now when it comes to this whole world of e-commerce, and they crushed it, John. They did.
Yep. Well, we've also got, Pete, some really explosive activity. And I'm not trying to make some stupid pun there. I really am not. But it is explosive because we've seen for multiple days, Pete, the uranium stocks just go crazy. They were pumping last week. One of the reasons for it, of course, is that Fukushima in Japan caused a lot of countries to rethink their energy policy. And Japan was going to shut them all down. Germany was going to shut them all down. But guess what? Now, with Russia cutting off oil supplies and gas supplies to most of the folks that have sanctioned them, you've got uranium stocks in big demand. Japan is going to be keeping 17 nukes online, Pete, and extending the life of 10 more nukes. And that's just them. You know, the same thing's going to be going on in Germany and anywhere else because, what are your alternatives? If you have a nuclear plant that takes 10 years to get in place and you're panicked because of Fukushima, and now all of a sudden you got no energy out of Russia, you got to do something.
Yeah. And, John, we've hit a lot on energy. We've talked a lot about crude, but you and I have been all over this nat gas story and the uranium story because we've talked about CCJ and we've talked about a lot of these different players that are involved, others. But, there is demand out there. There's absolutely demand out there. We know it. You and I both have been talking about it. And take a look at nat gas. Started off the year at 3.5. We got all the way up to 10. We pulled back a little bit. And here we are once again at 950. It gives you a little bit of an idea of how many people were sleeping, even though these guys talk about this macro crap all the time. They were sleeping through the nat gas deal. And meanwhile, nat gas has just been going higher and higher and higher and establishing higher lows along the way. So there's no doubt that the alternative energy space, as well as just about everything we've just mentioned, from uranium to nat gas to crude, it's all working to the upside. No, by the way, even corn, because yes, corn is part of that whole world as well. Corn prices continue to rise as well.
Yep. Well, and Pete, you said going higher and higher, and Ford is my next one because going higher and higher is like the Mach E. Now that used to be called a Mustang, and then when they decided to make it an EV, Pete, they call it the Mach E, and it's now up almost $9,000. The prices are going up for the 2023 model. We'll have some stuff for you tomorrow on the show, folks, about, and this is not me saying EVs are bad, but it's just that there isn't enough lithium. There are not enough chips. There's not enough of almost everything you need to really make these a significant alternative to fossil fuel powered vehicles, including hydrogen powered vehicles. There's just not enough, Pete.
And the people who want to argue that, John, can stuff it, because the reality is how do you get copper? How do you get lithium? How do you get all of this stuff? Well, you got to mine for it. And how are you going to do that? I mean, there is a big, long process. You and I both know it. We talk about the battery space all the time. We're excited about it. We love it. We are embracing it, everything. We love what Tesla's doing. But it does take time, and it's going to take time. And there is, a lot of disruptions along the way. And I think it's pretty interesting to see what these dollars look like, John, that Ford's talking about, and the prices they're talking about, these leaps of 8,000 to 9,000 more. Those are pretty extreme. So definitely something that we're watching very closely as time continues to move forward, like it always does. And the Mach, Everybody wants it. It's pretty exciting, but will it kind of shake out a couple people, John, because of the prices that they're talking about right now?
Right. And it's another thing, Pete, that they mock Elon, but that guy can actually get the supply
Yeah.
because he's pretty much locked it up. And
Mhm.
everybody says, oh, but Ford's been making vehicles for longer, Mercedes and all these other things. Yeah, they've been making vehicles, but they haven't been making batteries as long as he has,
Right.
and they haven't secured all those supplies. All right, Pete, another story. Take a look at the GDX. This is the miners, the gold miners. So we talked about uranium miners and so forth. This is gold miners. And these are options that expire this Friday. So if you're September 2nd, by the way. So if you're somebody that doesn't trade options, again, when we see upside call buying, that is a bullish play. So people that just trade stock would probably just buy stock on this one, Pete. You and I think we're smarter. We're saying, because we understand options, I can take a smaller amount of risk and still have the same upside with that smaller amount of risk. And that's why I'm buying those calls, because they only have 4 more trading days to be right, Pete, but they bought 1 million share equivalent of these GDX upside calls.
Well, and John, we talked a lot about it, but I'm going to hit it one last time. We're going to go to the EV space. I'm going to hit you with Tesla. And why am I doing that? Well, it was the very first option that fell under the unusual option activity category for us today on our systems at Market Rebellion. And it's phenomenal. I mean, there was size buyer comes in. Oh, and by the way, they just came through a split as well. So you've got that combination. So don't get confused on where the stock is. Trading $284 a share at this point in time. 14,000 of the Tesla calls that expire on Friday at the 290 strike were being bought. Call it for an average, if you middle it, right around $4. Looking for this stock to make a pretty substantial move to the upside. We know how Tesla can trade. We know how the momentum can get pretty excited sometimes. If we can pull out of the funk that the markets are in starting last Friday and into today, I think that there's a really good chance. And oh, by the way, when these things do split, John, they do notoriously have a pretty substantial move to the upside. And a lot of the people who say it's the exact same company, they really don't understand what they're talking about, because yes, there is truth to that, but now you've got access, right? There's more access to it. The options are a little bit easier for people to tolerate and be able to afford to try to make moves to the upside and so forth, like we're seeing here. So there's a lot of different things fundamentally that do change, despite the fact that, yes, it's the same stock. Yes, it's the same amount of value and all the rest of it. But there are elements that do make it a lot more interesting for a lot more people. And that does change things a little bit.
Yep. Well, speaking of changing things, Pete, how about changing on over to sports?
Yeah.
I know it's something that you cover on your show, the Sports Huddle, every Sunday from 10 until noon on CCO, which is an Odyssey network. I know that something put a burr under your saddle about who are the greatest players right now. So I'll let you take that and then I'll opine on it.
Yeah, well, we got 2 different categories we're going to hit today, John. One of them is there's already guys in college that are on the hot seat. We'll do that number 2. But number 1, we're going to start off with, okay, so there's this whole thing that's been going on about the NFL players, who are the top this, the top that. But I think it's pretty interesting, John, because they've got their top 5. I'm going to read them off for you just so we get it really clear. Number 5, Josh Allen, quarterback, Buffalo, total stud. Maybe he should even be a little higher. Cooper Kupp, the wide receiver who just about broke every record that's out there last year, he's number 4. Aaron Rodgers, quarterback, only the MVP. I mean, this guy's unbelievable year after year, getting older. He's not quite Tom Brady, but he's not that far behind. He's at number 3. Aaron Donald is number 2, and number 1 is Patrick Mahomes. Not a bad top 5, but I'm going to slip somebody in there who should be in there, and maybe he pushes out, I don't know, Aaron Donald maybe. But I'm going to give you Deebo Samuel. He's 26 years old. And, John, he is the only player in the history of the NFL in the same season to have 1,400 yards receiving. And he actually had 300 yards rushing. And, oh, by the way, he rushed for another 6 touchdowns as well on top of his receiving touchdowns. Those are numbers that when you're the only guy who does it, I think that says something about where you maybe should be ranked rather than being number 28 I think this guy should be in the top 5. Do you have anybody that you'd slide in there maybe?
Well, and that kid, Pete, when he gets a punt or a kickoff, it's
Yep.
lights out.
Yeah.
Nick Bosa. So I'm
Yeah.
staying with the same team as you, San Francisco. I know you saw him practice last week because I saw from your social media that you were on the sidelines with a bunch of those players.
Yeah.
And I don't know anybody that can handle this guy, Pete. I mean,
Right.
he makes grown men look stupid trying to block him. He and his brother are both next level players. So I'm going to say Bosa and throw him out there. And I don't know which one of them we have to toss, but he'd be on my list of the top 5.
I think I'd yank out Aaron Donald once again, and it's nothing against Aaron Donald. He's a great defensive lineman or whatever himself. I mean, the guy's phenomenal. But I think you're right, John, and I think we could have picked either Bosa brother and put him in there instead of Aaron Donald. That's how good those guys are. Unbelievable. Now we're going to jump to the other one that's really got my, my saddle's got burrs everywhere right now because I'm a big fan of Nebraska football. Why is that? My daughter went to school there. I didn't go there. I played at the University of Minnesota. I'm a Golden Gopher, but I got to love Nebraska. I'm a Husker guy. But I got to ask you, John, I mean, Scott Frost, I love the kid. I love what he did at Oregon. What he did at Central Florida was absolutely remarkable. But he comes back to his alma mater where he was a Heisman candidate and all that kind of stuff and quarterback of the team. And here he is, the head coach, John. They're over there in Dublin playing Northwestern. They're favored by 13. They're down, but they score a couple touchdowns in a row. Now they go up, and he decides to do the onside kick in the middle of the third quarter. Now, I don't know what he was thinking. He said he wanted to play momentum, but it is frustrating for the fans. It's frustrating for me as a guy who's pulling for him. I like the guy. He and I have become friends. But, John, when you lose to Northwestern because of the fact that your head coach made a decision to give them the ball on the other side of the 50, that's a problem. And I think the hot seat got a lot hotter in game 1 for Scott Frost. Do you think I'm nuts, or do you think he maybe has a little bit of headroom in front of him that's getting ugly?
Well, I think you're right, Pete. It's going to be tough because, again, he talks about holding on to momentum. Well, don't give the other team momentum.
Right.
That was a momentum breaker because that's a binary event. If you get it, yeah, you kept momentum. If you don't, then you just gave the other team some breathing room and you gave it to them, like you say, at the 50. Yeah. So I don't like the decision. It would be something I would have expected in the late fourth quarter if you thought you had to have that, Pete, but not then, not when you're making the comeback. I thought it was the wrong move at the wrong time. Doesn't mean I think he should be fired, but it's definitely he put the pressure on himself.
He warmed up the seat.
Yeah, he did warm up the seat. Folks, send us some questions, please. Retweet. Tell us what you'd like to be hearing and seeing. Remember, we're incorporating that macro minute at the top of the show because that's all it's worth is 1 minute.
1 minute only. One.
We'll see you tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time.